Hello, everyone, and good morning. I'm Perry Jones of Heifer USA, and I am really excited to be here this morning with Karen Washington, the founder of Rise and Root Farm and an incredible speaker and writer on social justice, food justice, and urban farming. Karen, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Perry, thank you so much for having me. It's been incredible time, an exciting time in our life.
It sure is. What a crazy time we're living in. And I know you're based in New York, which, as we know, was one of the early coronavirus epicenters. Could you speak to some of the challenges that people in New York City faced when accessing fresh, healthy food pre-COVID, and then how that's changed during the pandemic?
Well, pre-COVID in New York City, especially in low-income neighborhoods and neighborhoods of color, we've always had difficulty finding fresh local produce, especially produce that was really safe to eat. We're surrounded by, I call our pyramid system of fast food, junk food, and processed food. That was pre-COVID. So the difficulty of finding fresh produce was really, really hard and challenging. Many of us had to get food from food pantries and soup kitchens. Now we're in the midst of COVID, and how things have changed is that, again, a lot of the working middle class are now relegated to food pantries and soup kitchens and free meals. They're now feeling the effects of trying to get fresh produce, the difficulty that is happening getting fresh produce. And I think it brings to the forefront how important eating fresh fruits and vegetables is, especially because a lot of the deaths that have occurred has been because a lot of our community residents have existing diseases such as type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and obesity. So right then and there, their immune system is compromised. And so you have that, and then you have the inability to get fresh produce and nutrition in your body. So now what we're trying to do here is to try to really provide as much fresh fruits and vegetables as necessary, along with what people are getting in food boxes here in the Bronx. But it continues to be very, very challenging. The food is free in most cases, but again, we really have to put the emphasis on healthy food options and not on packaged processed food.
Mm-hmm. Have the food pantries remained open during this time, or were they also?
Oh, they're overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed. The soup kitchens and food pantries are overwhelmed. So many people are out of work, and it just breaks my heart that, the leadership of this country is not focusing on the pandemic in the way of it impacting so many of our people. Each and every day, I don't lose sight of so many friends and family and loved ones that have been lost because of this pandemic. And again, bring it to the forefront the racial inequities, the economic inequities that we see mostly in communities of color. And so, Perry, we can't go back. This is a moment in time where racial and economic inequities is at the forefront. How do we then move forward? How do we then move forward as a society to make sure that people understand that food and water are human rights for everyone?
Yeah. In every crisis, something that I've experienced in my life, at least, is in every crisis, there are also opportunities. Things come apart a little bit, and it provides an opportunity for things maybe to come to get back together in a different and even better way. I know while we're still in the middle of this, it's hard to know what those things are, but they'll be there. I'm confident that the kind of work that you do and we do together will actually get better on the other side of this. So I can't wait to see, in retrospect, one of these days, explain to my grandkids how we took advantage of this moment in time and made improvements. I'll come back to the coronavirus topic in a moment, but Karen, could you tell us, please, a little bit about your background for those that might be listening in or viewing in? Being from New York City, you don't think of, agriculture necessarily. Of what inspired your passion for agriculture and especially sustainable agriculture, and what led you to set up Rise and Root Farm?
Well, I hope that my story can resonate with a lot of people and potentially with people that want to learn more about agriculture, go into gardening or farming, because believe it, folks, I grew up in the projects. I had no inkling that one day I would grow up to be a farmer. I mean, back in the day, farming was equated to as a form of slavery. I mean, that's what I was taught and brought up to sort of believe in. But I know that the narrative has changed. So I grew up in the projects. My relationship to food was that my mom was a good cook. We had 3 meals a day. So we were never hungry. Things started to change when I became a single parent, moved to the Bronx in 1985. I was also working as a physical therapist. That was my profession. So I saw the relationship between food and health with a lot of my patients who grew up on farms. And so when I moved to the Bronx and had a backyard, I decided to grow food. And to my amazement, I realized that food came from the ground. It wasn't in a grocery store, it wasn't in a supermarket, and the taste was amazing. And so that changed my world. And while I was doing my work as a physical therapist, I was intrigued by the stories that I would hear from so many of my patients who grew up on farms. First conversation was always, Ms. Washington, how could you be a farmer? That's such hard work. I hated it. But then when I started to talk about, but yet that food, those little tomatoes, that corn, all of a sudden it was like, you're absolutely right. We were never sick a day in our lives. We had everything we didn't go to a grocery store. We went out in the fields and got our meals. And so for me, that was a huge awakening about a time in our lives where we didn't have grocery stores and majority of our food came from farms. And now we're relegated to getting our food from a grocery store or a bodega. So yeah, that's my life.
That's fascinating. Could you tell us a little bit more about Rise and Root Farm? Like, what do you produce there? What are your markets, and what else do you do there?
So Rise and Root Farm, folks. So it started by a dream. Folks, dream big, because the 4 of us is myself, Jane Hodge, Michaela Hayes, and Lori Clevenger. We all came from community garden background, growing food in the city. And we dreamt that one day we could come together and grow food collectively on a farm. And that was our dream. So I'm telling people, dream big and also shout your dream out to the universe, because everywhere we would go, we would say, we're looking for land. We want a farm. We're looking for land. And someone heard us, pointed us to this region called Chester in Orange County, New York. They just started a program where they're encouraging young farmers. We were able to get 3 acres of land. We have a 30-year renewable lease, unheard of. And we're growing everything. So, for the first year, okay, folks, because at community gardens, you want to grow everything. You get the catalogs in January. Those pictures are fabulous. And you want to grow every item. And so the first year we did that, but realized that we didn't have the labor to maintain all of it. So now, after 5 years, we sort of know exactly what we grow and what we grow best. So we grow our tomatoes, heirloom tomatoes. We grow all culinary and medicinal herbs. We're good at that. This year we'll have peppers and eggplant and cilantro and squash and okra. So all different things. And then we have 2 markets. So we have the Union Square Market, which is more of a high-end market. And then we have a market in the Bronx on Tuesday, which is in a lower-end market in the Bronx. So it's very, very exciting. One thing that we pride ourselves on is that everyone has the right to our food, no matter what. And we never turn away anyone who's hungry. At this point in time, I think it's very, very important. And we did that pre-COVID. Again, food and water are both human rights, and everyone should have access to that.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. And so back to the topic of COVID, thinking of your farm, of Rise and Root Farm, and other farmers that you've been selling alongside at the farmers market, et cetera, how has your farm and how have other farms been affected by the pandemic? Both
Oh, you
labor, on the farm and also your market channels and whatnot.
Yeah, so on a farm, it's been difficult initially because I'm the oldest. I'm 66, whereas my other farming partners, they're in their 40s. And two of my farming partners have children. So there was a need to practice safe distancing and hand washing and just to be careful and wearing masks. And so it limited my capacity to go to the farm every day. So now I'm going to the farm on 3 times out of the week. I go there. Out of the week, we wear masks. When we're around, we practice social distancing. Hand washing is mandatory. So we're getting used to that. So, and that works out because, when you have acres of land, you can spread apart and do things. So that's good. In terms of market sales, in the beginning it was somewhat difficult because you had to now do your markets totally different. So whereas the customers back in the day could come and like squeeze your tomatoes and stuff, they can't touch the food. They have to wear masks. It has to be 6 feet distancing. And so you had to all of a sudden turn your market into a way that was safe, both in our market in Union Square and our market in the Bronx. And it was an educational process and for people to get used to. But now the sales are really, really incredible because people now understand that food is medicine. Fresh fruits and vegetables, they're medicine, especially at this time when we have this virus. And we need nourishment, and we need a way to provide nourishment and self-care within our bodies, and people understand that comes with fresh fruits and vegetables. So now, the lines out the door, people want to make sure that they have a supply of fresh fruits and vegetables. So sorry to say, we're not hurting, but we have to make sure that, again, everyone has access to fresh fruits and vegetables. And again, it's not like pre-COVID when, quote unquote, organic or all natural food was mostly an elitist sort of way of living for most people. Now people understand that everyone has that right to fresh produce.
Yeah, maybe that will end up being what we look back on one of these days and see changed a little bit. Actually got better during this terrible time, is that people became more aware of where their food came from, how it's produced, the importance of taking care of the people that produce it and haul it and distribute it. That's sort of exciting to think about, right?
The food chain is very, very important because I think a lot of people, when you go to a grocery store, you never question where the food comes from, who grew it, if it was sprayed with pesticide or insecticide. But now you have a chance to really look at the food system and the food chain, like who's doing the work, how's that food being distributed, how does it come from the field to your plate, who are the quote unquote essential workers that are working to make sure that you have those fresh fruits and vegetables. And I want people to start asking questions about that. Now is the time that if you're getting fresh fruits and vegetables, start asking those hard questions like, how did it come to fruition that I got food in my hand that I can eat? What was the food chain, the value chain, in essence, for me to have this fresh fruits and vegetables, and start having those hard conversations? Because before COVID, a lot of the fruits and vegetables came from farm workers. I mean, farm workers were really, really people of color, immigrants. There's been a hidden past when it comes to labor on how our food is harvested, the inhumane conditions of some of the farm workers. And so hopefully with this COVID, we can start asking those hard questions like how does food get to our table? Who's growing the food? And making sure when we talk about essential workers, that people are paid a living wage, that they're treated humanely, they have access to health care. And at the end of the day, let's make sure that we talk about the human aspect of growing food and not shelter people just because they have a different color or ethnicity. We need to talk about that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you for bringing that to the forefront. And, in this chapter of Heifer's history in the U.S., we're working a lot more in the rural South. And everything that you just said is true of people working on farms, also people picking all of the food, that's grown on a lot of the larger and smaller farms. A lot of those folks have been working under terrible conditions. A lot of folks in processing facilities, poultry, beef, pork, they're standing right beside each other. Anyway, yeah, I just really want to reinforce everything you just said about the importance of taking care. Really, we've kind of opened up the hood and we're able to see under the hood of our food system now and recognize the importance of acknowledging who are those people that for years have been making that food magically appear in the grocery store, like you said earlier, the importance of taking care of them. And a lot of those are the more vulnerable parts of society, the lowest paid, longest hours, hottest and hardest working condition people in our country. So thank you for always helping to bring them to the forefront. Karen, a follow up to what you were saying about the farmers markets. Have you seen any other interesting small farmer pivots or direct to consumer market innovations in response to the pandemic, or is it more just what they were doing before has got a stronger demand trying to pull more product? What are people doing creatively right now in response to this?
So I know I can just say what we're trying to do here in the city. Living in the Bronx, out of 62 counties in New York State, the Bronx ranks 62 as the most unhealthiest county in New York State. And so in the very beginning, I think the conversation started in March, where we have over close to 200 community gardens in the Bronx. And so we decided, let's get a group of community gardens and start talking about how we can come together as a group and start growing more food on a larger scale collectively, and start having those conversations, going out to our communities and finding out what the need was and how we could work with local food pantries and soup kitchens to make sure that they have an ample supply of fresh fruits and vegetables. And so that's what you're starting to see is groups coming together. I think back in the day, a lot of the issues that we had, and I think a lot of the problems that we have is this individualism, how people felt that their organizations or individuals, they can just work on their own. And I think what this pandemic has realized is that we have to work in community and we have to work collectively and cooperatively, which is really, really important. And so that's what you're starting to see now, groups of people coming together, linking organizations with one another to make sure that there's an ample supply in terms of our food chain, which is happening. One thing I can say that I'm so proud of is that I have not seen hunger lines. I haven't heard within my community that people are walking away, they're hungry, they're starving. And that's a good sign, because I always say in the greatest country in the world where we grow enough food and we waste enough food, that food is not getting down to the people that need it the most. And so we have to start thinking about how do we grow more efficiently and how do we grow in a way that we don't waste that food. And now is a perfect time to, again, have that hard conversation to make sure that food gets down to the people that need it the most. So people are coming with innovative ways of partnering together, farmers with restaurants, farmers with soup kitchens, gardeners with, community residents, just people making sure at the end of the day that people are being fed. And I'm so, so proud of New York. I'm so proud of especially grassroots organizations and people of color coming to the aid, thinking outside the box and say, you know what, we're going to make sure that our families are fed. And also going back to when I was growing up, I grew up in a community that if my mom wasn't home, I could knock on the door and the next door neighbor said, what, you didn't eat nothing? Come on, sit down and have a plate. And so I think we're also getting back to sharing sharing meals and sharing recipe and making sure we're knocking on that door, making sure Mr. and Mrs., you got something to eat, making sure that our neighbors now are being fed. And so if there's anything positive that's coming out of this pandemic, is a way how communities are starting to come together. And I think food is at the forefront, because at the end of the day, no matter your language, your religion or whatever, what brings us together is food. That's the common denominator, and that's what you're saying now.
That's fantastic. Oh, that's great. So I'm going to transition topics a little bit away from the farm and to something that's always present in your mind. And even when you're talking about food and agriculture, in addition to being a farmer, you're also a very well-known community activist. How has your background in community organizing helped you to bring people into closer contact with the food they eat and the farmers that produce it? And then also, while you're talking about that, if you could speak to why this is particularly important in marginalized communities or communities of low-income communities.
Being a community organizer and learning what community organizing is all about is regaining your essence of power. Back in the day, you become complacent. You don't listen. You listen, and you're afraid to speak up and speak out. And so for me, what I learned through community organizing is that we have to remember, we got the power. We have the power, and somehow we have relinquished our power to others. And so for me, community organizing, I realized the power that I have was to speak up and speak out when you see injustice. Plain and simple. Speak up and speak out when you see injustice. And so for me, that's powerful. And it allows me to take that power from someone who feels they have power over me for me to regain my power over them. And it's so, so critical. And we try to instill that sort of notion in people's head. But if we come together collectively, how powerful we have. When we talk about the government, that the government owns it. No, the government doesn't own it. We, the people, own it. And we have to make sure that people understand the power that they have. I think we have fallen into a level of complacency and silence, two deadly things that can kill any movement. And what you're seeing now with Black Lives Matter is this insurgence of people speaking up and speaking out, demanding their power, demanding that the people that we put into power are accountable. And so folks out there, you have to understand, collectively, the people have the power. We put people in office so that they can work for us. And when you sit back and you become complacent and silent and allow people to do what they want to do, you're giving up your power. And I think that's what happened in the food system. I think we've allowed the government and lobbyists to dictate the type of food, especially in low-income neighborhoods and neighborhoods of color, come into our neighborhood. We have subsidized food that come into our neighborhood. We have the processed food, the junk food that's coming into our neighborhood. Why? Because we've allowed that to happen. So now, folks, it's for us to okay, now is the time with Black Lives Matter, with people out there marching and sacrificing, for people to understand the power that they have to make change. And that is, when you see injustice, speak up and speak out.
I love it. Thank you very much. That's fantastic. Karen, what are some of the mechanisms? You talk about people need to speak up and speak out. I know education and outreach are a big part. What are some of the mechanisms that you deployed to help communities have more influence, ownership, and control over their food system? I want to say take back the power, but I think in some cases, a lot of the communities that we're talking about never had it to begin with. This is a long-standing historical problem that we're trying to overcome. But what are some of the more specific examples of things that you're doing to help them have more ownership and control over their food system?
First of all, when it comes to agriculture, folks, agriculture. Culture, the word culture. We got to understand what that word culture means. And for me, understanding the historical content of our food system. For so long, we've been brainwashed. We've been brainwashed. This food system was built on the backs of an indigenous and Black people, plain and simple. And so now taking back that narrative that was stolen from us, pushed underneath the rug, and starting having people have this conversation of the importance of the indigenous people and people of color that built this system, the food system, the housing system, the transportation system, all these systems that you see was built on the back of an indigenous and Black people, Black and brown people. And so starting having those conversations around history, especially when it comes to food. Well, why were we brought here as enslaved people? Why? Were we brought here? No, we were brought here because of our knowledge of agriculture. Start with that. Start with that, especially in school. When you start talking about the history of this country, we need to correct that so people can understand that they have a voice and a contribution into our history. That's number one. Number two, we need to talk about race. And it's a difficult conversation we need to have, but we need to have that conversation, how race has really entered into food and farming, because for so long, people will tell people in low-income neighborhoods, well, if you want to have food security, all you got to do is eat some fruits and vegetables, give up that soda and drink that water, and all of a sudden you become food secure, without looking at the institutional and structural determinants that reinforce racism. And we don't have those hard conversations about racism and power, and who has the power and how that power was achieved and how to get back that power. And so education is the key. Understanding the education framework of agriculture, that's number one. Number two, also look at the inequality when it's come to wealth, and to make sure that people understand again, how did this country build its wealth? Again, on the backs of an indigenous and people of color, and start having those hard conversations about race, about economics. And this is a time, folks, this is a time where we're in a new phase of life. We're in a new phase of life. This pandemic has really blown wide open the inequities we see along racial and economic lines, and we need to have those hard conversations, because, folks, at the end of the day, we can't go back. The world has changed. The world has changed. We know who the essential, quote, workers are. The world has changed. So then how do we move forward to make sure at the end of the day, everyone has the right to food and water, everyone has the right for housing, everyone has the right for education, everyone has a right to build a wealth economy, and everyone has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
I love it. You have brought up so many topics that it would be nice to have the rest of the day to explore a little further. And I do want to point out that a lot of the issues of ownership and control and exploitation in the food system, those are not things that are only relegated to the past. Those are things that are actively happening right now in the food system that we've got, right? So
yes.
You hear a lot of people say, let's get beyond whatever happened in the past, but it still has very real reverberations in the present, and a lot of that same kind of exploitation is still happening among Black and brown and indigenous folks in the food system. So I'm going to keep moving, if it's okay, a little further. We've gotten a few questions that have come along the way, but so one of the things that you've done that I want to ask you to, if you would speak to us a little bit about, Karen, is you've co-founded the Black Farmer Fund to invest in Black food system entrepreneurs and communities in and around New York. Could you tell us a little bit more about the Black Farmer Fund?
Yes. So I live in New York State, folks. So, and we've had this conversation amongst us for maybe a year and a half, when we're looking at the food system through the lens of race. And so, as a Black woman farmer, I'm curious, like, how many people out there look like me? So we took a look at the census, and the only census we have so far is the 2017, as they try to update the census. So if you look at the 2017 census in New York State, out of 57,000 white farmers, only 139 are Black. What? 139 are Black. The average income for white farmers are $47,000 a year. The average income of Black farmers are negative $906. So, folks, swallow that hard. Swallow that hard. How do you think that makes me feel? How do you think that makes so many people feel? And at the end of the day, there's no money or resources that are helping us. And if we don't get help from the government, we don't get help from banks, again, people look towards people of color in terms of deficits and problems, and or high risk. So if you even want to go to get a loan, you're not going to get a loan with a low interest rate. You're at risk. So you're going to get, not only are you struggling to maintain your business and to maintain your farm as a person of color, you're then being slapped with an interest rate that's high. And so the reason why we wanted to start the Black Farmer Fund is, number one, is to look at how do we base build our wealth together and talk about those hard conversations. How do we realize that we have wealth within our own communities? You know, for so long, Black and brown and indigenous people, folks, we're not poor because we're poor in the sense that our resources are extracted. We go out of our community time and time again to buy goods, to buy food, and we never think about base building and communal wealth within our community. If you can realize that you take that dollar of all the people in your community, you put that dollar together, how you can support a business, a Black and brown business. But yet we don't think about that. And so what the Black Farmer Fund is trying to do is not only getting people to understand what communal wealth and social capital looks like, but have that educational piece about how to build wealth, which is not spoken in our community. You know, when wealth is spoken in our community, let me sign you up so you can get a welfare check. Or let me sign for unemployment. And that's no, right in our midst. Because now is the time for us to get together to build a base of social capital and communal wealth. Look within our communities. Back in the day, we did susus, folks. Y'all know what I'm talking about? We put money together and we pay people's rent. You know, I remember back in the day in the projects, we did chicken dinners. We did all, as so communities could put money together so someone could get some Pampers or someone could get some food or someone could get some clothes for school. We did that. And so we have to start having that conversation about what does wealth mean? Not capitalist wealth, because capitalism wealth is extractive. You're making it, it's about individuals making that money. And it's like, no, it hasn't worked for us. So how do we turn the capitalist system upside down and start talking about the we instead of the me, and having those hard conversations? So the Black Farmer Fund, if y'all want to donate, we're going to be taking money, we're taking resources. But I'm just, to all jokes aside, the reason why we're trying to do this fund here in New York is that we're trying to get the kinks out, trying to do it the right way with community input. And then once it's up and running, we're going to say Oakland, Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit. We've done the hard work. Here it is. Do the same thing, because that's the future. That's the future for me. That's what I'm looking for, a future where I can see people in my community having jobs, having restaurants, being farmers. Why is it that in low-income neighborhoods and neighborhoods of color, people come in, and we're using the gentrify with the G word, gentrification, come in and push us out? We want to make sure that the people that grow up in our neighborhoods stay, that the businesses have our faces. And that is one way on how to build that capacity, looking at the wealth that we have in our community as a whole and putting that resource and putting that wealth together to support a local economy that has our faces and that has our voices. And that is scary. That is scary for the powers that be, because at the end of the day, they don't want to see brown and Black people having power. That's a scary thing. You can see what the administration is trying to do about stoking the fears of people. You know, they're going to come into your neighborhood in suburban, and they're going to, you know what, folks? Forget about that. Let's look at our community as a whole, the richness that we have, and turn the page of people calling us poor or calling us, we have problems or deficits, and turning that narrative around and look at the richness that we have in our community, because for so long, poor people have been surviving without resources, and we've always made a way. So now turn that inner self into a positive, powerful community. Let's come together, let's work together, and let's change the system in such a way that it has our faces, it has our value, it has our community, and it has our power.
You've left me a little bit speechless. Thank you, Karen. That is fantastic. Thank you so much. Kim Barbano, who's helped us arrange the logistics of this call, has posted more information about the Black Farmer Fund for folks who see this that want to contribute or learn more about examples and what you're accomplishing in the Black Farmer Fund. So I would please encourage everybody to click through and find out more and see how you can help. Any advice, Karen, on what organizations like Heifer and others can do to help more in fighting for a more just food system?
Yes, you know what? Okay, so I try to tell a lot of white-led organizations that are in communities of color doing food and farming work. Mm-hmm. Granted, appreciate the work that so many of you have done year in and year out, but it's time now to give up the reins and let people of color start controlling their destiny, to make sure that the money that is given directly into grassroots organizations of color that are doing the work. There was a one-pager that was just put out by an organization called HEAL, along with 7 organizations of color that went to the Kellogg Foundation, Walmart, all these white-led organizations, to tell them time and time again, when it comes to helping communities of color, organizations of color, it always seems to be a trickle-down effect from a white-led organization. Mm-hmm. And you're perpetuating that stigma that Black and brown organizations cannot do the work on their own. And so we're asking people time and time again, it's time for people to get out of the way and start really looking at the people that are doing the work and supporting that work directly to the grassroots people that are doing the work. What Heifer International has done and needs to continue to do is to reinforce that policy of passing on a gift, to reaffirm and provide a platform like you're doing for people like me and others to have a voice, to have a voice where we can speak up and speak out, to inform people of the work that we're doing. I learned so much from Heifer International. I was telling Perry back in the day, I mean, that's what I got a part of what I am as an organizer and as a farmer, because I learned from Heifer International the passing on the gift quality, value, that each one teach one. And that's so important in the work that we do, is that whatever you have, the knowledge that you have, resources that you have to help the next person. Pass on that gift of knowledge. Pass on, I think, what is it? You're giving the calf so that a person can feed their family. And once that person be able to feed that family, they then take that food or that calf or whatever and then give it to the next. So it's a continual movement of responsibility, of cohesiveness that we need to learn, because at the end of the day, again, it's not the me, it's the we. And so just, continue to do the work, to continue to understand, folks, that the majority of people who farm globally are women. And I think for so long we've been excluded when it comes to agriculture, especially here in the United States. When you look at farming and agriculture, it's white male. But if you look globally, the people that are doing the work globally are women and women of color. And so now we need to bring that to the forefront. And what do women of color need globally? Well, we need resources and technology. So at the end of the day, we can also regain our power, and people can understand that this global food movement should have our faces and should have our voices.
Amen. Very well said. Very well said, Karen. Thank you so much. So with Zoom, Kim is not with me right now to kick me under the table to start to wrap up here, but I know that we've gone several minutes over. I would love to keep talking. I want to thank everybody who's joined us, though, this morning. Karen, especially want to thank you for your time and wisdom this morning. Are there any final thoughts or words of wisdom? You've given us a ton already. But
Yeah, follow your dreams. Don't say no. You know, a lot of times people ask questions and you'll get no as an answer. But you know what? No is just no. No means you struck a chord. No means you struck a chord. So you keep asking, follow your dreams, put it out in the universe. No one is going to hear your hopes and dreams if you keep it inside. Speak out to the universe, because someone is bound to hear it. That is my way of living time and time again. I speak out my hopes and my dreams, and someone has heard my calling. I don't know. I speak a lot to the ancestors, and I really think that for me, you ask, is it a calling? Why are you here on earth? And I really believe that hopefully that I'm here to make a difference, that I'm here to open doors so that the rest of people can come in and just push the wide open. And one last thing, I'm just so proud of the youth, what the youth is doing. I grew up in the civil rights movement, and someone once said that Rosa Parks got us from the back of the bus to the front of the bus, but that's where we got stuck because we never thought about owning the bus company, the bus enterprises. Now, folks, it's for us to start reframing the ownership of companies in a way, in organizations, again, that have our faces and our values, so that everybody has a fair share in the work that we're doing collectively.
Well, Karen, I love you. We love you. It has been a true honor this morning to speak with you. You are doing tremendous work. Please keep up the fight. You have inspired a lot of other people this morning, including myself, to keep up the fight. Thank you so much for your time this morning. And thank you once again to everybody who joined us. I guess we'll sign off. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.